This was a week of transition for my family, of endings and beginnings, of death and new life. Sunday things were pretty tranquil, but Monday morning we swept out our last crumbs and pulled down the door on this phase of our life as a family. I have to admit that as we rumbled away in that 26-foot moving truck that I felt very uncomfortable driving, I was in a bad mood. And the reason I was in a bad mood was that despite years of efforts to minimize, loading the last things in the truck that morning made me realize that we had a long way to go to just get rid of junk. We had so much junk, so much cheap plastic. And we had a long way to go to get to a place where all we had was the necessary things of life, lasting things and beautiful things. And that is really hard to do in this world. But getting on the road helped that mood to dissipate. And on the way, we found that making a big long trip as a family with a dog actually brought about some positive changes. We found parks to hang out in instead of gas stations. And it turns out that at least where we were traveling, some of the freeway rest stops were really nice, with fenced pet areas, huge parking spots for semis and 26-foot moving trucks, and beautiful scenery. As we got to the last part of the journey, we experienced this gorgeous sunset that is just barely visible through all the bugs smashed on the windshield. And regardless of how hokey you think it sounds, it really felt like the Great Mother was welcoming us to our new home. After a night of not enough sleep, we managed to get ourselves bleary-eyed to the closing of our new property. I told Sarah how I've been to a lot of closings over the last decade, and there's never this triumphant feeling at those closings. You're looking at that huge stack of documents to sign, and you're saying to yourselves, I hope we know what we're doing. There wasn't really any time for celebration after the closing because right after that, the boys and I had to go and unload that big moving truck into a storage unit. And I didn't get any footage because you kind of have to have some motivation, some energy left to film something. And that was the low point of energy and enthusiasm for the week. It was probably the toughest moment of the week. We'd already spent several days loading the truck, cleaning the house. Every night was progressively less sleep. The stress was building, and now we had this last thing to do. It was hot, we were dripping sweat, but it had to be done, and so we got it done. But finally, driving back to turn in the truck, as we drove by the mountains we would see every morning from our new property, we finally could take a moment to appreciate what had just taken place. This moment really was the culmination of several years of trying to figure out what was next for our family, and then several months of working through the unknowns of trying to sell a home and buy a property amidst a global pandemic. The next day we made a trip to the property to see the man who'd sold us the property, whom we'd struck up a friendship with in the process. You're probably wondering why we weren't just moving in, but he needed a little more time, so we're going to be back to move in a few weeks. We went and walked one of the paths where the children had never been to help us all start to build a relationship with this place that is going to be the center of our lives for the next while. Then the boys and I came back a few days later to help the owner stain the deck, which is going to make a big difference in helping the place look in top shape when we move in. My son, who's 8, had his first full day of hard work working with the big boys, and we told him to get used to it. And that right there is one of the many reasons we got this place. It was one of those days where we started early to work and then worked right through lunch and ended about 4 p.m. So when we were finally done, we were famished. And we found a great local diner cafe and had us the greasiest meal we could find, and it tasted awesome. The next day, well, you can see for yourself what we did the next day. We headed up to those connection points between heaven and earth we call mountains. Really nothing more needs to be said about this part. And I'm going to end this video where it started, and that's with our dog Lyra, who, if you've been listening, you've probably been hearing her chewing her bone or growling at her toys while I've been making this, because she's sitting right here by my side. She's kind of been our companion spirit animal through this whole transition, because we got her right as we decided to make this big change. And so she's been growing by our side as this change grew with her. And this week she was here for everything. One of the best things about dogs is the way that they live almost exclusively in the moment. So even in a big week like this, where your mind can be in the past and what you're leaving, and it can be in the future and all the things coming up, she will always bring you back to the needs of the moment. To remind you that you need to eat, you need to exercise, to take care of business, you need to find time to play, to make new acquaintances, to savor and enjoy something, whether it's your first ice cream cone or the latest smell wafting in the breeze or leaf blowing in the wind. She takes a lot of effort, but she always helps bring us back to where we are and what we are doing, to quote Yoda. Probably the best accomplishment of the week was that Sarah and I still got out on a date on Friday evening, and Lyra was there for that too.